This is the Life's Better podcast where we talk about how life is so much better with God, community, and purpose. And today we're going to be focusing on that community aspect of the conversation. And I'd like to ask you, Josh, if you went out and asked 50 to 100 people what they thought the key to good relationship is, good relationship, what do you think would be the number one answer that you would hear over and over again?
Communication, the way that you talk to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that for years and years and years. I assume you've heard that for years and years and years.
Yeah. Gotta talk.
I actually Googled it, and Google AI agreed with us that that is like the number one answer to the question. Now, you might debate and say, no, this is better, or this. At the end of the day, we know when it comes to healthy, growing relationships, communication is going to be at the top of the list.
Yeah.
It may not be number one for everybody, but it's important. At the same time, would you also agree that communicating well can be really, really hard?
Yes, 100%. You can be misunderstood. Like there's a million,
I can't tell you how many
like that.
times I've walked away from a conversation just realizing I blew it. You know, maybe I went in and I wasn't professional enough. Or maybe I went in and I was feeling too professional and I came across rigid and, cold. Maybe I thought I was funny and I just offended somebody. Or have you ever had one of those moments where you just like string words together and you have no idea what you're talking about and you just walk away like, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, no, my least favorite are the ones that I replay in my head at the end of the day and I'm like, that could have gone so much better if I had just said X thing rather than Y. And
Yes.
yeah, no, it's the worst.
So we know that communicating is difficult, but we also know that we're going to need to do it with a lot of folks throughout our day. And so we're going to be talking about how to do this well. Now, before we talk about how to have better conversations, what we're going to do is we're going to play a game called Why No One Wants to Talk to You. The way this game is going to be played is there's a sought-after communicator. His name is Julian Treasure, and he came up with what he referred to as the 7 deadly sins of communication.
Okay.
And so I'm going to share with you what those, in his mind, are the 7 deadly sins. These are habits that maybe you've gotten into. These are things that we need to identify. Otherwise, it's just going to kill conversations.
Right, okay.
And then I'm going to share them with you. You're going to then rate them for what you think are like least problematic to most problematic.
Okay, so number 1 is like the worst one.
It's the worst. And
7 is like passable.
Yes,
right, okay.
Exactly. All right, let me introduce to these. For those of you who are watching on our YouTube channel, you might be able to see my little.
It's so fancy.
Very fancy.
I like the texture on the board.
I am reusing this board. We like to save money around here.
I do that all the time.
So in no particular order, we'll just go ahead and start with this first one. It's negativity. So if you're having a conversation with somebody who is just consistently negative, it's not. I mean, it's not necessarily that they're focusing on a complaint, because that comes up later. But it's the tendency to just kind of have a doom and gloom perspective,
pessimistic,
very pessimistic attitude. That's what we're talking about. Excuses. We actually admire people who take ownership, who are people who are go-getters. When you're always making excuses for why something, it just shuts down. People don't want to listen to you. It's like, they're just going to give me another excuse. That's kind of what we're going for there. Judging. This could be you have a judgmental spirit, or it's someone who maybe you're in conversation with and you feel as though you're being judged. None of us want to be judged and found wanting, and so that's definitely a shutdown to conversation. Gossip. We know that it may be kind of fun to hear what they're saying about somebody, but what do we know? As soon as we leave, what are they doing?
They're talking about us.
So we don't really want to have those conversations with them either. We've got over here complaining. We understand that there are going to be like disappointments in life. But if you're just always focused on the disappointments of life, it just drains people. Lying, I probably don't need to say anything about this one. Lying breaks trust, and so you can't have a trusting, growing relationship with good conversations if they're lying. I would extend this a little bit further and say that even if you're talking with someone who's always exaggerating, maybe it's not a bold face, I'm trying to deceive you, but they're just exaggerating. Again, people don't want to hear that over and over again.
They're the one-uppers, right?
Yes, exactly.
Can't hear a story without one-upping.
And then the last one is dogmatism.
Okay.
This one's a little strange.
Love dogs.
This actually has to do with people that don't know the difference between an opinion and fact.
Okay.
And they talk as though what they are sharing,
it.
even though it's their opinion,
Yeah.
is a fact. And they're very dogmatic about their opinions. So,
Okay.
what would you say is number 7 on the
So
list?
least bad.
Least problematic when it comes to the 7 deadly sins of communication.
So this is like, all of them are awful.
Right,
To be
right.
completely honest
Yeah,
with
yeah.
you, like I don't like any of these. But like, there's some that are a little bit more forgivable for me than others. One that I can empathize with, and like, I obviously I think this is a defense mechanism that we all have, is the excuses one.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna put that at number 7.
Yeah.
I think naturally, when you bring up people's faults, that is a tendency we all have, and you have to fight it. So
Yeah.
I understand. I don't like it. It's annoying when like people literally can't take ownership of anything, but I understand it. Next one, I'm gonna go with like what I can tolerate the most, because I can typically dance around. Okay, like you are really opinionated about this, and so I'm gonna say dogmatism.
Okay.
Because I admire when people like are really passionate about things, but again, not so great when you can't convince them of something else, because they're just like, "Well, this is fact."
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Next, all of these I hate. When I say I can tolerate this, it's that I can get through conversations, but
But I don't want to hear him again.
I won't like blow up about it. But these people I don't trust at all, and it's liars.
Okay.
But I have.
Are we
I know
going number
people.
5 here?
I'm gonna go 5
Okay.
for lying, which might shock people, but like, you can get through. Like, if people are like always lying, you're like, "Yep, okay, go ahead, finish your story. Now let's get to something else." You know?
Especially if we're just doing the exaggeration.
Yeah.
It's kind of the, all right, yeah, I'm sure the fish was that big. All right. We can get past that.
Yeah.
So I get you.
There's a tendency for all of these 4, though, that are all similar that are left that just bother me to my core. I'm going to say number 4 is negativity,
Okay.
because some people are just dealt a bad hand. And at least they're not talking about other people, which are what the other 3 are kind of about. And so there's maybe a little bit more empathy there. Number 3, I'm going to say judging,
Okay.
because maybe they're judging me the most, because gossip feels like judging others. So I'm
Sure.
just going to separate those 2. And if you keep judging me, like, I've gotten to the point in my life where I've been judged enough where I'm just like, if
can
that's
get
all
over
you
it.
do, it's whatever,
Yeah.
I think yesterday I was playing Frisbee with some of your boys
Yeah.
and a group of people, and Will, Abby, and Emily were all laughing, and like I start walking over to them, and Abby goes, "We were laughing at you," and I go, "That's cool."
Yeah.
Like,
Whatever.
I don't care.
Moving on.
And and they start laughing. They're like, he doesn't even know like why we were laughing at it. But like, I don't care. Like, it just doesn't.
Those
bother
are
me.
good looks. That's
Yeah,
what they're
yeah,
laughing at.
exactly.
He's
Yeah,
just so
yeah.
much better looking at us, we can't help but laugh. Yeah.
Number 2, I'm gonna say is gossip,
Okay.
and I have a reason why complaining is number 1. But gossip is typically my least favorite. But I'm not gonna say names, but there are times where I've been around people who just cannot stop complaining about how tired they might be, about a hike that we just went on, or how awful the weather's been, or like just like constantly like kind of dragging me down.
Sure.
And I can't, like, at some point, me will blow up. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, I cannot be around you right now. Like, you need
You hit
to
a
stop.
saturation point and it's over. Yeah.
Oh, and it's like all the others I can like get through. This one is like, I'm at risk of actually getting mad.
So number 1 on the list would be complaining, 2, gossip,
Gossip.
judging number 3, negativity 4, lying 5, dogmatism 6, and excuses number 7.
Yeah. Are these at all similar to what you would do?
You know what? I would hands down have lying at the top of the
Okay.
list.
Yeah.
And the only reason is because for any like quality relationship, I have to be able to trust you. Like it just breaks trust anytime you lie. So that would be number one on the list. I think you're coming off of a trip with our youth where there was a lot of complaining for just ridiculousness, and so maybe you're feeling this one a little heavier than you normally would.
Probably.
But it may not be my number one. But I agree. Gossip would probably be number two. There's a lot of these, and what's sad is as I look at this list, I can fall into every single one
100%.
of these habits.
Yeah.
And if we want to have meaningful conversations, we've got to be able to identify, hey, where might we have some of this habits?
Yeah.
And it may not be in all of our relationships, but maybe with a few, it's crept in. And we're just warning you, it will probably hurt that relationship. You will lose something at some point because these are the 7 deadly sins that just crush good conversations from happening. So be aware of those. We may reference them a little bit later in our talk, but what we really want to focus on today is not so much the negative things that hurt conversation, but we want to look at what we should really replace any of these deadly sins with. And I want to introduce this by actually sharing a story. I don't think I've shared this story on the podcast, but I think, Josh, you've heard it at least in a staff meeting. But it's a story that took place a number of years ago. I was talking with a student I was working with. She's a senior in high school, and she was telling me, Jonathan, I think my sister hates me. Like, we used to have such a close, connected relationship, and now I feel like she doesn't even want to talk to me. And so, of course, I started asking questions like, okay, that's strange. Like, how did you get to this point? And so she's a senior in high school, and she's driving her younger sister, who she used to be really close to, who's a freshman, to and from school. Like, they go together. And so in her mind, going into her senior year, she thought, man, we've got a good like 15, 20 minutes, there and back. Man, this is going to be a great time to connect. And she would ask these questions, and her sister would just shoot her down with these one sentence, like no, yes, leave me alone type of answers. And she's like, oh man, my sister hates me. And so I just, again, pry a little bit deeper and ask her a few more questions. And by the time I've kind of diagnosed the situation, I just said, well, if you want to have deeper, more meaningful conversations with your sister, try asking more meaningful, connective questions. And she's looking at me like, well, what do you mean? And so I was like, well, here's the thing. Like, if your sister's anything like I was when I was in high school, like I did not want my parents asking me, so what did you learn in school today? Like when I got in the car.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, I don't know what I learned. I'm just glad it's over, right? But those were the types of questions she was asking her sister. It was hey, your sister may be different than me, but when I was going to school, like I was already dreading having to sit 7 hours in my class, and I'm already stressed about certain things. She probably doesn't want to be asked, did you study for your algebra test? Like she's just not interested in those things. So I said, how about this? Tomorrow, maybe ask a question like this. Hey, if you could go anywhere today instead of going to school, where would you want to go and why? And then I gave a few other examples of questions that would, allow her to share her values and what she's interested in and experiences. And the next week, she comes up to me and she's like, got this huge smile on her face. She says, my sister doesn't hate me. We're having great conversations. It totally worked. And so what I didn't know then, and I know a little bit more now, is that communication experts actually talk about this as the different levels of communication. And the way that they explain this is that typically we will have a given subject that we're talking about, but there's different levels to going deeper into that topic. And so there's 3 primary levels of communication that you will run into in any given conversation. The first is the practical level. This is if we're talking about algebra, this is did you study? Hey, are you ready to get what was the score? It's just very practical stuff. The next level is the emotional level. And this is where you're talking about your emotions, how you're feeling. And this is this may be where, that sister is thinking to herself, hey, if you're going to be asking me about algebra, that's invoking a lot of anxiety in me. and I'm not really wanting to have an emotional conversation right now, and so she's not going to go there, even though that's where maybe the sister is wanting it. And so this is less about like solving problems practically, and this is more about, I just want someone to empathize with me. And then the third level is the social level. And the social level has to do with, again, your beliefs. It has to do with where your values are. This has to do with, who you are, intrinsically as a person, and how you interact with society as a whole. For those of us who are people of faith, our experience with God. That's the social conversation. And bad communication happens when you're talking about the same subject, but you're on a completely different level.
Yeah.
Now, we see this in marriages all the time. A spouse will come home from work complaining about some, horrible experience with their boss, and in that moment, that spouse simply wants to have an emotional conversation. Please empathize with me. That's the conversation level that they're on. And the other spouse is having a practical conversation. Well, practically, let me help you solve this. What you need to do is go in tomorrow and do da-da-da-da-da. Now, because they're at two different levels, a bad conversation takes place. Josh, I'm curious, can you think of maybe a recent time where you've had a bad conversation because you were just not at the same level as the person across from you?
Sorry, Emily. No, this happens to us a lot, and I try to switch gears, but when for example, there was one day pretty recently that Emily came home and it was just a hard day, all around. She had to deal with 2 fights at school, which never, one fight is a lot, but 2 fights, crazy. And then on the same day, because she's one of the only 2 Spanish teachers, she gets called out of her class in the middle of class trying to teach, or in her prep time, to go translate for the office people, and so she's running back and forth and also trying to watch her class, and she just comes home and she's just sometimes her tendency, and this is where my red alarm, I need to fix this, goes off. She'll have a tendency to say inflammatory statements that trigger me to I need to go into fixing.
Sure.
I don't know if I can do this anymore, or I'm awful at my job, or stuff like that you might be feeling after a really, really hard day. And I felt that way before. I think everybody can empathize with Emily here. But I immediately go to practical. I start saying things like, well, they sounded like they really needed you there today. And it sounds like you're really useful and you have good job security. And that's not what she wants to hear about a job that has pained her today, right? It's not that she's worried about getting fired. It's, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, And so I just need to listen in those moments, and I'll even have a tendency on accident to sound like I'm defending the people that have wronged Emily that day because I want to create peace. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and the last thing that she wants to hear is you defending someone that is an enemy in her mind right now.
Why in the world are you on their side? And I'm like, I'm not, I'm on your team.
You're clearly not connecting with me right now, because all I want you to say is, you're right, Emily.
Exactly.
I feel your pain emotionally, Emily. Yeah, so bad conversations happen, again, because you guys aren't on the same level. And so psychologists, as well as even neurologists, they say what's really important for having a really good conversation with somebody is to make sure that you use the matching principle. And the matching principle, you probably understand it even just by the name. You just identify, okay, what level are they at? Is this a practical conversation? Is this an emotional conversation? Is this a social conversation? And wherever they're at, you just match whatever level they're at. Now, easier said than done, right? And so another way to look at this, in fact, Emily may have already been trained in this. They're doing it more with elementary students, but a lot of teachers and elementary kids are being taught these levels, but they use different names for it. So for example, instead of, is this a practical conversation, they're being trained to ask the question, do you want my help? So is this hey, do you want help right now? The emotional side of it would be, or do you want a hug? Do you want my help? Do you want a hug? And then the third one is, do you want to be heard? So we've got the practical in the, do you want my help? We've got the emotional and, do you need some empathy? Do you need a hug? Or in the social side of things, hey, do you just want to be heard? You just need to share some things about yourself, your values, your beliefs, and I'll just be a listening ear. And what they found is when teachers and students are both on the same page and they know the language, like students are actually really open to identifying, I just need a hug right now. I just need you to hear me right now. Yes, I need you to help me. Like, give me the answer. And so this is just another way to kind of take another angle at figuring out where the level is. But I would also caution you, if you go into work tomorrow and you start asking all the ladies in the office,
You want a hug?
do you want a hug? I mean, you're going to spend the next hour in HR.
Probably.
Maybe a sexual harassment course or two. So what does it look like maybe on a practical level to not only identify, okay, what level are we at, but at the same time have more meaningful, deeper conversations? And that comes down to the similar experience that my friend, or the student that I shared the story of, and that is to simply start asking deeper level questions. Deeper level questions, which sounds super intimidating. I don't know about you, but sometimes I just want things to be a little more surface. They can be surface level questions that simply start to take your emotions a little bit deeper. What I mean by that is it's any question that causes someone to share their beliefs, to share their experiences, to share how they feel about any given situation. And it doesn't have to be the, hey, tell me the, ugliest sin that you've ever committed. Like people aren't gonna wanna go there. That's super deep. So what are some examples of deep questions? I'll give you kind of the practical, hey, this is what we usually do, and this is maybe a better strategy. Okay, we could ask the very generic, how has your work week been? We've asked that. How's your work day been? How's your work week been? Or we can ask a deeper question, which is, hey, what has been the lowlights and highlight of your work this week? Instead of just getting the fine, okay, kind of sucked, what you're doing is you're like, okay, I'm going to actually share what I value this week. And I'm going to share about how maybe some of those values were interrupted based on like the low light. I'm going to share the high and I'm going to share the low. Another example of kind of a general question would be, how's your day? And we all ask that question, hey, how's your day been? Another way to ask that, but taking it a little bit deeper, would be, what do you wish you had more time for today? You're going to understand
that's good.
where their value is. Man, I wish I had more time for this. You're also going to be able to identify, okay, are we going to have a practical conversation about maybe solving, that problem for the next day? Or do I need to simply listen and hear where they're coming from? Another variant on that would be, what made you laugh today? Which I think is a great one because it sets, the conversation up in a positive direction. Like, hey, where'd you, and so you don't have to hear the complaints, because I know that's number one on the list. And so these are just some examples of, you can take very similar questions that you would normally ask, but just shift it a little bit to go deeper, and that's where the more meaningful conversations are had. When I look at Scripture, I think there's an individual in the Bible who he just asks really great questions that cause people to go deeper, because he figures out what level they're at, and then he takes it to a deeper level. Now, I have someone in my mind who would you say asks really, really great questions in Scripture?
Jesus.
Absolutely. Give me some examples of some of those questions.
So we have a couple. One that he asks the rich young ruler is, why do you call me good? And this causes him to kind of pause, because he was asking Jesus a question about, how do I get, eternal life? And now he's all of a sudden having to reflect on Jesus's equivalency with God, right? If I think Jesus says God is only good, so why do you call me good?
Hint. There's something there. Let's go deep with this.
Next is, what do you want? Which automatically triggered, what's the love story movie? You know what I'm talking about? Where he's like, what do you want? What do you want? And she's like, it's not that simple. It's
I honestly don't know that movie.
Everybody else knows, and I'm dumb. It's either way.
I'm the dumb one. I
wrote
clearly don't know.
it down to reference it. Did not write down the name of the movie, and I'm dumb. But this causes the person multiple times. He just asks, what do you want, or what do you want from me?
Yeah. Again, going even back to the teacher talking to a student. Hey, do you want my help right now? Do you want a
Yeah.
hug right now? Do you want to be heard right now? I mean, that's
clarifies what type of conversation he's
Exactly.
having, which is great. And then the last one, who do you say I am? Which he asked Peter and the disciples after asking, what do these people say I am? Which is a bit more of a surface level question, right? Like they're just reporting. But now it's like, okay, they're deep thinking. What do I actually think of who God or who Jesus is? Do I
Yeah.
think that he's who he says he is, or do I
Right.
think that he's just a prophet? Like what? Like why am I here? Why am I following Jesus? So
Yeah.
all bring out critical thought and maybe their feelings even on who Jesus is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's interesting when it comes to really good conversations, they rarely have to do with just like the practical nature of things, like the facts. Really good conversations get to the feelings of where people are at.
Yeah.
And so surface level conversation, particularly as you're just kind of, stepping into reconnecting with people, that's great. But if you want to have really good conversations, you've got to start asking deeper level questions. I'm going to give one more example of someone who's done this really, really well. And then what I'm going to do is we'll close it out with a question that is a deep question that you can, if you're brave enough, to go ahead and start asking. And it comes with almost a certified guarantee that you will have a meaningful conversation, but I'll explain that in a moment. So an example of someone who's done this really well, there's a surgeon in New York named Bahafar Edi. He's an Indian guy, and he specializes in removing cancerous tumors from prostates.
Oh wow.
Fun surgery, right? So he has every single day he'll have patients come in and he has to give them the bad diagnosis. Yeah, you have cancer of the prostate. And every single day as he's looking at their charts, he will have a conversation with the patient or multiple patients where he says, but I would recommend not having surgery. Now he's a surgeon, and you would think most surgeons just want to slice and dice, but he says, I recommend not having the surgery. Instead, what I'd like you to do is have active surveillance. And he explains, what I'd like you to do is actually, every 6 months, we'll do some blood work. Every year, we'll do a biopsy. And every 2 years, what we'll do is we'll do an MRI scan to see what's going on. And if there's a lot of growth and it looks, dodgy, we'll consider surgery. But the reason I say this is because you're in luck. When it comes to prostate cancer, it's one of the slowest growing forms of cancer. And on top of that, because of where the prostate is, it's right next to those nerves that allow for urinary and sexual function. So it's a relatively high risk surgery that I'd like you to avoid if you can. Now, what ends up happening is for years and years and years, about 90% of his clients would hear it. Then they'd talk to their spouse, they'd go home, talk to their spouse, then they'd come back the next day and say, doctor, I want the surgery. I've got to have the surgery immediately. And he's like, I'm the surgeon. And I'm telling you, don't have the surgery. Like, what's happening? And he started realizing, I'm missing something. I'm doing something wrong. And so he went to some communication experts and he asked him, hey, this is the conversation I keep having with my patients, and this is the result. What am I doing wrong? And they say, yeah, you are doing something wrong. You're assuming that they want to have a practical conversation with you, that they want your medical advice in that moment.
Wow.
And he's looking at him like, of course they do. I'm the doctor. Why else are they there? And they said, well, just go a little bit deeper and see if you can hit a different level and have a different outcome. And so the very first patient was a 62-year-old man, and he had to, like, hey, you've got cancer. And then he asked this question. Instead of launching into, hey, here's what we can do, he asked this question. What does this cancer mean to you? And the man spent the next 7 to 8 minutes talking about his dad. And he talks about his dad, who he lost when he was in high school because of cancer. And then after talking about his dad, he started sharing about his own grandkids and how, wow, they're inheriting, so many problems in this world, like climate change and so on. And then he looked at his workplace and he said, I don't know how people are going to treat me if they hear I have, prostate cancer. They might, have me like 1 foot in the grave if I share this. And so everything that he had to share, what kind of conversation did this guy want? Did he want a practical conversation? Did he want an emotional conversation? Did he want to have a social conversation?
Emotional.
He wanted the equivalent of a hug. That's what he wanted. And so this doctor gave him the equivalent of a hug by empathizing with him. And then after empathizing, he went ahead and said, hey, if it's okay with you, if it's all right with you, would you mind me making a suggestion when it comes to treatment? And then he talked about active surveillance. The guy received it, went home, and never came back. Instead, they went through the active surveillance method. And what he found is once he started having that level of conversation, even though it took just like an extra 8 minutes, almost all of his patients went with his recommendation because he began to have that communication at the level that they were at. So that's one example. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, give me a question that I can ask in order to have a more meaningful, a deeper level conversation with somebody that I care about. All right, here it is. As soon as you're gonna hear it, you're gonna just wanna ignore it because it's a little scary. But the question that I encourage you to ask somebody is this. When was the last time that you cried in front of someone? When is the last time that you cried in front of someone? Now, does that sound like something you just want to go around and start asking people?
No.
It's a little intimidating, right? It's a little
Yeah.
intimidating. So what they've done is lots of experiments and study after study after study with hundreds and hundreds of people where they ask this question. And with almost, like, without exception, people walk away from that conversation having felt understood, having felt empathized, having felt as though they were validated over and over again. People even make the comment, that's one of the best conversations I've had in years. And some of these people are having that conversation with a complete stranger. Now, how does this work? This would work by getting some of those surface level questions out of the way. So you're not launching in like, hey buddy, how's it going? When's the last time that you cried in front of somebody? Like don't just launch into it. But once there's a level of comfort, go ahead and ask the question, but then you go first. You show vulnerability and share, hey, I want to ask you a question. When is the last time that you cried in front of somebody? For me, it was about a month ago. I was in worship and blah, 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 whatever it might be. And then say, what about you? And what ends up happening is because of your vulnerability and because it hits an emotional side as well as a social side, it's not just surface level practical side, you end up having a very meaningful conversation. So if you're brave enough, give it a shot and have some really good conversations. Josh, any final thoughts?
No, I love this. Practically speaking, if you are a leader in any church, you'll probably eventually have to write small group questions, and learning the art of being able to bring out of people more conversation is something that is learned. It's not easy. That was one of the hardest things I struggled with because your tendency is to ask just practical questions.
Yeah.
Okay, we preached this. What do you do now? I know what you should do. You should read your Bible more. Stuff like that. But if you start with some emotional ones and then lead to, okay, what are you gonna do with that? And kind of let people get there on their own, you're doing a lot better job with small group questions. So I think this is practical for just about anybody, even if you're like, I don't know how I can use this. If you're a church leader, it's gonna come and play.
Yeah, either that or, you're on a date with your spouse and, instead of just talking about what the kids are doing or not doing and you're getting frustrated, throw this one out
How good
there.
the Yankees game was.
So have some
Unless
great
that's the last
conversation.
time you cried. Don't bring that up.
Yeah, they lost, yeah. Until next time, don't forget that life is so much better with God, community, and purpose.